for his excellent presentation. And the floor is open for you to ask any questions.
Is the microphone?
Thank you for your presentation, and we're all committed to pushing for an end to the blockade in the United States. However, I wanted to ask, in the absence of a full lifting of the blockade, are there specific measures that, for example, that were relaxed under the Obama administration and then reimposed? Are there specific measures that would be especially helpful if perhaps we were able to achieve a partial lifting of the blockade or a relaxation? I was curious if you had an opinion on specific areas that would have a lot of impact here in Cuba.
What? Yeah. So what we're going to do is just get a series of questions, and then Director De Cosios can take some and make some answers. David?
I would have, having a copy more or less of what you presented would be a wonderful thing. I'm wondering, and I was just so impressed by everything I heard. So is that possible? I know it's not written, but something that might capture so much of it would be deeply appreciated.
That's what happens when you speak from the heart.
Yes.
We're very fortunate to have this wonderful array of folk here to serve as resources. But David, I can tell you that Gloria De La Riva and I think Cheryl Lavache and others have been recording. So we'll make sure to make that available, because you're absolutely right. Joe?
Oh, hello. I'm Joe from North Carolina. Thank you for your words. I feel very moved. There's so many questions running in my head. The one thing I would like to know, just from your opinion, and it's been asked around from some comrades of mine. So when we lift the blockade, because I do believe it's going to happen, I'm just curious as to what your thoughts, especially with your perspective, is of how Cuba might respond to that. As far as, is there any thought? I know your culture, and I'm seeing it, and I see how the CDRs operate, and I see how just how amazing that sense of collective thought and ideology and everything is. But are there concerns that when you lift the blockade, like capitalism and some of the negative effects of it might come in and kind of take the way of life that you have? I'm just curious from your perspective, because I think I would really appreciate it. Thank you.
Start on this side.
Hi, I'm Marty Schmidt from Seattle, Washington, and a member of the National Lawyers Guild, and I would like to ask you about the importance of our work on with other groups in other countries to address the illegal unilateral coercive measures that the U.S. imposes, and particularly how important, from your perspective, is it that we bring a lot more attention to the violations of international law and the impact, as have been so well demonstrated repeatedly in the UN General Assembly by the UN Special Rapporteur on unilateral coercive measures and so forth.
So we have probably about 45 minutes, more or less. So I just want to make sure everybody's conscious of time constraints. So why don't we try, let me see how many more questions do we? There's a lot already. One more? We'll start and then we'll see if there's any time left. I know, and then we have two in line here. So let's,
Hi, my name is Lindsay. I'm from North Carolina. Thank you so much for your comments. These are really important counter-arguments and contradictions that we all really need to bring back to our communities. My question is around how the lessons that we've taken from Cuba are going to teach us so much about how to organize the permanent organization of the working class in the U.S. But do you have recommendations for how we expand this conversation beyond Cuba to other socialist projects internationally to build true proletarian internationalism? Thank you.
So we'll go with this for now, and just let's see if he's able to make his way through this. We'll take it from there.
The first question, I didn't get your name. Michael. The question is, what can we expect, or what can we hope as measures from the U.S.? It's difficult to start. But the Biden administration committed to the American people, not the Biden administration, the Biden electoral campaign committed to the American people to swiftly reverse the actions taken by the Trump administration, which were wrong. And when in, I think it was January 12th of this year, the US government included Cuba in the State Department list of countries that sponsor terrorism, the Biden president-elect said that this was a mistake. So, if there was to be coherence in his statements and his promises, not to Cuba, his promises to the people that voted for him, he would at least exclude Cuba from the list of countries that sponsor terrorism. And this is something which is very significant, because it's not only that it's a slander against Cuba. The problem is that once you're in this list by US law, the government of the United States punishes any organization anywhere in the world that engages with the Cuban government. So any bank, any business, any government agency, anywhere in the world that engages in economic activity with Cuba is punished by the US because we're in this law. Of course, this is a very unilateral law list. It's illegitimate. It has no recognition or genuine support whatsoever by the UN or any international organization. It just has the power of the US and the might, the financial and commercial might of the United States. So if the government were to be coherent with its own statement, it could take that step and it would be significant. Now this government also, during the electoral campaign, in addition to saying that it would swiftly undo what Trump had done, it specifically pointed to three areas. It said that depriving Cubans from remittances from their families in the United States was a nasty thing to do. That you don't do that to people, to deprive their standard of living. Yet, it's been in office for 9 or 10 months already, and it has taken no step. All it did was, after 6 months, committed to a commission that came back with proposals, and they refused to accept them. And the US government prohibits the institutional sending and the cheapest way from anyone in the United States to send money to their relatives in Cuba, thus punishing the people of Cuba. And it's not by chance, it's not something naive, because it has an impact on the standard of living of a portion of the Cuban population. And that there's an aim behind it. It wants to create resentment, irritation in the population and to turn them against the government. Another measure could be, based on what the government of the United States promised, is to reinstate travel between the two countries. Airlines, cruise ships between the two countries. It has not taken that step. It also said that it would reinstate migratory services of their embassy here in Cuba, which have been suspended since November or October 2017. Meaning that a Cuban that wants to travel to visit the United States, to visit your relatives, or to migrate to the United States, has to travel to a third country with the corresponding expenses, apply for a visa without being sure if they're going to get the visa, and then come back to Cuba or from that country migrate to the United States, which is a burden, an economic burden on the Cuban population, again to irritate and to punish the people of Cuba. Those are three areas that the government committed to do, and it has not taken one step. It could erase an illegitimate list of how's it called, restricted entities in Cuba that they allege are linked to the armed forces or to the security service or have links to Venezuela or whatever. And for that, they just have a group of entities with which no American or anyone under the jurisdiction of the United States can engage. They cannot stay in that hotel, they cannot do reservation, they cannot go to a restaurant, including private entities are in that list. Those are, but I could go on. The Trump administration applied 243 coercive measures against Cuba. So the list is immense. I'm just putting a few examples forward. Now, Joe from North Carolina. Of course we are concerned. Of course it is something that we take into account. We know the immense cultural, political, and ideological influence of the United States. But that is a challenge that we need to be prepared to take. The Cuban Revolution cannot sustain itself by putting our people in a glass, glass dome. It has to be legitimate, it has to be viable, and it has to be successful, engaging with the rest of the world. Believing on the power of our own influence, of what we can achieve and what we've been able to achieve. So, your question is a very pertinent question and has been a question in our minds for the past 40, 50 years. But the answer that as a consensus, I won't say to everybody, that as a consensus we have in Cuba, is that we need to be prepared to engage. And we need to be prepared by educating our people, by uplifting our values, showing what we can do, and be ready to be influenced by other ideological and cultural paradigms if that is the case. I think that in whatever case the truth should prevail, above all if it's real engagement, not engagement through digital networks. It's people to people, the real one. Now, Marty from Seattle. The international community already rejects the economic blockade and U.S. sanctions or coercive measures annually. It's been doing that since 1992. The U.S. is totally isolated. In fact, one of the reasons claimed by the Obama administration for the change of policy was saying that the U.S. policy isolated the United States. It didn't isolate Cuba. It ended up, and that is the case today. And that is because of the effort of many communities, including American communities, in calling for an international effort to repudiate the coercive measures against Cuba. It is an important effort. It is an effort that has results. But today, the fundamental effort has to be within the United States. Because the US government seems to be unmoved by the position of the international community, by the position of trade unions around the world, of NGOs around the world, of community organizations, of non-governmental organizations, of religious organizations, and of governments. It's immune. It doesn't care. So the major effort, without denying the other one, I would think should be within the United States. To influence your politicians. To make the government understand that it is not right to do that to the people of another country. That it's not decent to do that to the people, and that it's not fair. And to make them accountable morally, if not ideologically, but at least morally, is it right to punish the population of Cuba as a whole because they choose to be different? They just claim the right to be different than the United States. And I think that that's where the effort should be, perhaps today, have more impact. And then the was how to take the conversation to other organizations around the world. I understand in terms of workers' organizations, what we can offer is our experience, which we truly believe is not replicable in other countries. I think that whatever experience you gain in Cuba, based on our neighborhood organizations, on our workers' organizations, on our women's organizations, on the way we relate in society, of our economic policies, of our educational policies, of our health policies, I think that are relevant references, but not applicable in another country. At some point, revolutionary organizations and movements, and we were at some point part of that, thought that what was good in one country, you just needed to apply it in another country. And we also went through that phase many years ago, when our revolution was younger, and the people in charge were younger too. And we also went through that phase. But truly, history has shown that it's not replicable. But engagement, sharing, learning from each other, the greater communication between organizations, that is what we need. Because that's where you build for your own circumstances and for your own jurisdiction what can be helpful, what can happen. That is the way I see it. I don't know if any of my comrades has another. Some of you are comrades from long ago. 3 of us shared in Angola as officers in the southern front of Angola. Different units, but at the same time. Thank you. Sure.
So why don't we start Kim, Mike, Mark, and Bob. Kim?
Hi, thank you so much. I really appreciate this conversation. My name is Kim. I'm with the Party for Socialism and Liberation. I'm from Columbia, South Carolina. And you spoke about Mississippi and the southern region in particular in the U.S. The state is used as a tool to really oppress the poor and working class, and the prisons and policing, and I also do prison work. And so my question is, under a socialist program in a worker state, what is the function of the state? Like, how did you make that transition, and what is the state's role and purpose in carrying out the revolutionary process?
Okay. Mike?
Hello, I'm Mike Beilstein from Oregon. I'm wondering about the rise of the economic and financial power of China in the world, if that can provide any relief to Cuba as far as international finance, as China becomes more and more important as a financial power in the world, is like for things like financing trade. Is it possible that you could go to a different source besides banks that are linked to the United States?
Okay, Mark?
Mark Ginsberg from Santa Cruz, California, and part of the Bay Area Saving Lives Committee. I'm interested in the issue of Guantanamo and wondering if during the short period of time when bilateral relations after Raul and Obama opened up dialogue, whether the issue of Guantanamo was part of any conversations and whether there's any, obviously no progress, but was there some real conversation about that? Thank you.
Okay, I guess we'll get Bob, and then we need to probably bring it to an end here.
Bob Miller, a member of the New York, New Jersey, Cuba Sea Coalition. My question is in relationship to Cuba's attitude toward legal immigration, and if you could flesh out the tendency of the United States to ignore legal accords for immigration while promoting illegal immigration into the United States.
One more, okay. Is it Bobby?
Yes. I'm Bobby Jones from North Carolina. As an African American growing up in America and living in America, if I close my eyes when I'm listening to you talking about what America has done to Cuba, I can hear similar things or the same things that America has done to black people as well as people of color. You know, they've employed the same strategies to demonize and destroy us as a community, just like the strategies they've employed to destroy Cuba as well. I believe that if we were to address those, then I think that our freedom is synonymous with Cuban freedom if we deal with those issues. So my question to you is there one thing that I can do once I get off the airplane when I get back in Miami to start trying to deal with this situation, to address the blockade, to address how America oppresses Cuba as well as black and other BIPOC people, to try to bring some resolve. Thank you.
I think we need to let the minister answer this.
Well, Kim from South Carolina. We could talk all morning just about our view about the function of the state. And to be truthful, that has been a debate in Cuba for the past, I would say, 10, 12 years. Very intense debate that led to amending our constitution in 2019. Because our concept of our society, the state had and continues to have a major role. To put it in simple words, as the broker to ensure social justice. It is the avenue through which you ensure social justice. Now, this could be different in different countries, including countries like ours that claim to be socialist. It's not the same role of the state. But in the past, we came to believe that the state was responsible for everything. From providing public education, public health, and national safety and security, to dry cleaning, and restaurants, and shoe repair shops. And for many years, we lived under those conditions. And we've come to the conclusion that the state doesn't have a direct role in managing and owning each and every business and commercial activity in the country. That the state does not have a role in repairing your shoes, or in a car wash, or in a dry cleaning, or in a barber shop, or in restaurants, all of them at least, or in all the business. And we have been withdrawing the role of the state in many areas as a way to ensure greater efficiency in our economy, of introducing new economic actors in our economy, private actors, including small and medium-sized enterprises and minimum-sized enterprises, some of which we call self-employed up to now, and strengthening the role of the state in the major sectors of the economy, those that belong to all of us, like mining, like major tourism, like the electrical grid, like major agricultural industry, steel, major industrial production, that continues to belong to the whole of the Cuban people, managed through the state. And the state has to strengthen its role in what we believe is the sole role of the state, which is healthcare. There's no private healthcare in Cuba. Education, sports in major areas. It doesn't mean that you can now have a personal trainer or something like that. The support of cultural and artistic activity, and of course defense and national security in our country. What we do believe is that the state, in whichever way any country should find, should be responsible to find an equilibrium between those that because of luck, because of talent, because of personal wealth, or because of greater opportunity, are better off, and those that, for whatever reason, are lesser off, or if that term exists, are in worse conditions in society in terms of the living conditions, the pay, the salary, the wages they receive, the way they can cope with their economic needs of them and their family. And that the role has to intervene to meet the gap in social inequality in society. I'm trying to simplify here what is a very complex discussion. That is the role that we see for the state. And we have a way in which we do it in the particular conditions of Cuba. The Chinese find another way, the Vietnamese another way, the Venezuelans another way, is the way we see it in the particular conditions of Cuba. And we're still struggling with those definitions. It is not a finished homework. It is something that we continue to improve because we think that we need to continue to test it every day. And that's why we speak on the Cuban Revolution in present terms. Right. We don't speak of revolution as of the past, as something that happened in 1959, or 1960s. When we speak of the revolution, we speak of our never-ending quest to achieve social justice and ensure development, prosperity with social justice. It's not a static concept. And that concept involves which is the role of the state always under question. And perhaps what we see today is different than 15 years ago, and what we find 15 years from now is different. But what we do not kid ourselves is to think that the state does not have a role in ensuring social justice in a society. That is the main concept for us. Mike from Oregon. We have an intensive, I would say, commercial relationship with China. It is perhaps our second economic partner today after Venezuela, which implies trade, implies credit, and is successful. I don't think that the economic might of China today and its economic priorities are sufficient to balance the damage produced or provoked by the economic blockade. And to say more, even in China, today we find banks, private banks in China, and sometimes state-owned banks in China that, because of fear of the damage they could suffer from the US, refuse to deal with Cuba, even in China. I'm not saying it's a majority. I'm not saying that it's making it impossible for us or preventing us to engage with China, but even in China we find it. We find it in every country around the world. But I'm saying even in China. And again, the might or the priorities of China today, which are important for Cuba, we cannot deny that, and have been very important for us for the past 30 years, I would say, it does not balance the damage provoked by the economic blockade. Mike, I believe, it was Mike from on Guantanamo. Mark. It's my writing. I couldn't identify it. We talked about it. It is a permanent issue with the United States. I would not say that it was among the basic priorities, because we understood that it was more difficult to overcome, and we're more concentrated in easing the economic blockade that has a major impact on Cuban life every day. And because since 1995, there's a monthly communication between the military command in the military base and the military command on what we call the liberated side, because it's the part of Cuban territory that is not occupied by a foreign power, which is what happens in Guantanamo, in the base which is in Guantanamo. But it is a topic, it is in the agenda of talks with the US. It was then, and it will have to be whenever we engage again. We're not engaging now in talks with the United States. Bob, in terms of legal migration, the agreements, the migratory agreements between Cuba and the United States, which are several starting from 1984, include the commitment by the US government to ensure documents for at least 20,000 migrants from Cuba to the United States. In other words, 20,000 Cubans, the US has to ensure that 20,000 Cubans have the possibility of entering the US as migrants every year. Since 2018, the US has been missing this goal. And the figure is 2,000, 3,000, some years 4,000. Without any reasonable explanation. Yet, they allow people to enter by illegal and irregular means. To give you an idea, in the fiscal year that ended in September 30th, I think the figure Inés was around 35,000 Cubans, 38 Cubans entered the United States through the border of Mexico, irregularly, and were admitted in the United States. So the US refuses legal and orderly migration for Cubans, thereby forcing Cubans to having to go to a third country, sometimes as far as Uruguay, try to travel through the hemisphere, through Panama, falling into the hands of criminal organizations that enrich themselves by extortion to migrants, criminal organizations tied to illegal migration, to drug trafficking and so on, suffering huge kinds of problems in the border of Mexico with the United States, and then allow them in, and yet have been refusing to comply with their commitments since 2018. As a result of the Trump policy that, again, the Biden electoral campaign said that it would review and that it would revise and go back to the migratory agreements which were useful and beneficial for the United States. Yet nothing has done, and we continue today. In practical terms, what the Biden administration has done is to apply the Trump policy towards Cuba. They are the Trump sanctions, the Trump migratory actions, the Trump narrative and false narratives against Cuba. It's a continuation of the Trump government under the Biden administration. And Bobby, the question perhaps should be asked among you. But it is true. What the US does to Cuba is very similar to what it historically did to the Black and Afro-American communities in the United States. What we've studied in the history of the United States shows us that, and shows us that it's one of the big dilemmas of US society. It's similar to what the English did to the Irish for over 800 years. And it's the nature of capitalism and imperialism. It's what they do. In the case of the United States, you are having that exploitation done within your country to a specific community, as it was done historically to the Native Americans in the United States also. So what you can share is that what's being done to Cuba, you can say, is what historically was being done to us. We need to correct this globally, not only for African Americans, not only for Native Americans, not only for Cubans. We need to correct this globally. But again, perhaps it's a question more between you than to be asked from us in Cuba. Thank you.